What's going on, guys? It's your boy Coder here with my boy Josh. So before we get started, before we do anything with this deck profile, I just want to preface this. Josh is sick. He's not feeling too great. That's why his cam's not on. That's why he's muted. But he'll be hopping in and out here and there whenever he wants to interject to add some stuff because he does have a pretty nasty cough and we didn't want to subject you guys to that. So Josh is here, but he is sick. So it's kind of like a solo Coder vid with a little bit of Josh.
Hi.
Men said hi. So this past weekend at the Webcam tournament, Josh and I piloted essentially borderline the same deck. We played the exact same main and spirit deck. A couple of differences in the side, which we'll talk about after. Josh made it to the finals. I got top 4. And honestly, this deck performed really, really well. I think we had probably the most solid Earth Nexus deck in the room. I felt pretty good about it. Josh felt pretty good about it. But unfortunately, we didn't get to test it all that much. This deck we rocked it without doing a whole lot of testing because Josh was on vacation. I was busy with a lot of stuff too. So we really did do like the majority of our testing like a day or two prior to the event and settled on this list. It did pretty well. So we're going to show you guys the deck list. But before we get started, I just want to remind you guys that moving forward, every deck profile on our channel is going to be released a day early for channel members. So if you guys are interested in getting deck profiles early from us, consider becoming a channel member. It's $5 a month here on YouTube. You support the channel and help us, fund some projects for this channel, which we're really excited to work on in the future. And on top of that, you get your deck profiles a day early. So without further ado, let's get into the profile. So to get started for the main deck, we played some really standard Earth stuff. We played the 3 copies of the Equilinx, which is like very standard, 3 copies of the Viscerus, and the new addition from Daybreak, we played 3 copies of Mudlet. Now, Mudlet was a really, really neat addition, in my opinion, because this card is just in-engine Eddy that you could re-trigger with an Equilinx, you could re-trigger with an Altar of Stars. So this card also, sometimes, if you have an Altar of Stars, lets you turn a bunch of your guys back to attack after getting Tsunami'd and stuff like that. It's really, really good to play around Tsunami, really, really good to beat over any 5s. Like, this card's really, really powerful into the 5s deck. So honestly, Mudlet, very powerful addition. Very glad to have added 3 of this to the deck, but we're not on Bloom. So we tried Bloom in a previous deck profile. Turns out we don't like it that much. It needs too much setup, but Mudlet by itself, very, very powerful. 2 Mostation and 3 Astrabbit, as well as 3 Elichick to round out all of the Celestials. This is our Celestial lineup. Honestly, very standard. I mean, we've been playing the Equilinx, Viscerus, Rabbit, Elichick since base set, and honestly, moving forward with the Mostation and the Mudlet, this just makes the Celestial lineup very clean, very standard. And the best part about this is that you're not playing too few guys. There's so many instances where with this deck we were playing too few guys. We've cut the Rummagem because that card was just way too slow, but now with this we have a good amount of guys where you're not going to end up bricking because you don't see enough guys and all that stuff. The lineup was just very solid. You agree with that, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, everything you said is great. I think the card that overperformed for me the most was Mudlet. Whenever I saw that, it demanded an immediate answer. If they PTA'd, even being able to punish with the Demeter afterwards was unbelievable, and very glad that this was a 3 of in the deck, although I did end up siding it out a couple times over the course of the tournament, down to like 2 or maybe even 1 copy.
Yeah, against some very specific matchups. The cool thing with Mudlet is that they PTA this a lot if you try to Mudlet an Astrabbit. And then after that, if you have Demeter, you could just Demeter, pump this up, still walk over the Astrabbit, and clear this. Which you can't do with, like, if you have the Astrabbit, which they'll always PTA. The Astrabbit, if theirs is in defense, like, you can't pump it up. And if they PTA, like, an Elichick, then it goes to 2, and then their guy's still in defense, so you can't Demeter pump it. But with the Mudlet, you can if you do see the Demeter. So it's very, very strong in that regard. So the Celestial lineup was very, very solid, to be honest. I wouldn't change anything about it. I wouldn't even consider playing the 3rd Mostation. I think the deck doesn't need it. Then moving on to our in-engine runes, we're playing 2 copies of Demeter only. Josh did this in the last tournament that he ended up winning, and honestly, it performed fine. I never missed the 3rd personally. And then on top of that, we're playing the 3 in-engine Earthquake, which is very powerful, and the Foliar Forest at 1. Josh was citing a 2nd copy of the Foliar Forest. I personally did not cite a 2nd copy, and I found myself signing this out a lot, especially because into 5s, I didn't feel like this was super necessary. I preferred to cut it for like more counter runes. If you guys want to not play it and just cut it initially for more counter runes, I wouldn't even feel that bad about it. In my opinion, this card is just nice in some very specific scenarios, and sometimes can just be used as an additional Nexus bank for Altar of Stars or for the Equilinx. So in that regard, I really like the Foliar Forest at 1, but I think you can cut it if you wanted to cut it. I don't think there's a necessarily reason to play more than just the 1.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. The initial theory with the Foloi was that it was just an additional Nexus bank for your Equilinks, because in the older profile, we were playing 2 copies of the Forest, so you had 4 Nexus banks instead. Rather than playing the Forest, I may even go up to a 3rd Demeter instead, as an additional option. But as we've been finding that removal has been king, that's kind of been like my theory over the course of testing. Theory testing, because I haven't played a whole lot of Daybreak.
Yeah.
Even in main decking more copies of removal, like Resting on Your Laurels, or even Cryoblast, if you can manage to fit the Spirit math, may be better than the Foley Forest in this spot as well.
Yeah, and then to round out the runes, I played 3 copies of Ambrosia, 2 copies of Resting as just like 2 additional copies of Earthquake, and these are all of the non-counter runes that you're running in the deck. Ambrosia at 3 is like necessary, and the Resting, I found myself sometimes siding it out, especially into 5s, because I feel like they don't put enough spirits on the board to warrant this, but against any deck that does play Divines, like extra removal is always good. Moving on to the counter runes, we played 3 copies of Altar of Stars, and this card overperformed. Altar of Stars is the best counter rune in the game, right after the Gorgon's Gaze, which is also insane. Double copies of Poison Tipped Arrow, 2 copies of Shield of Achilles, and 2 copies of Tsunami for 3, 6, 8, 10, 12 total counter runes. And honestly, I wouldn't change anything of this either. Me and Josh both decided to side deck the 3rd copy of Tsunami and the 3rd copy of Poison Tipped Arrow. Those typically went in when the Resting on Your Laurels were not good in a matchup. You would side in the additional copies of these, so you had the extra counter runes. But in general, I found that this deck, it doesn't need to really have a whole suite of counter runes in order to beat the opponent, because you're always negging their counter rune lineup by just popping it with the Equilinks over and over and over again. So you just having a couple of counter runes is good enough to stop them, more so than them being able to stop you, because you're able to deal with their counter runes very, very efficiently. Off to the spirits, we are playing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 copies of Terratlas, 12 Earth Spirits. This is less than the normal lineup that we played. We used to always play 14 4 Thunder, 2 Water. This time around, we did something a little different. We went for 14 Earth, 4 Thunder, 2 Water, and then 2 of what I like to call the Flex Spirits. So me and Josh both played Fire Spirits for the tournament. You can fit the Lunar Spirits here, and the only reason why is because you don't technically need 14 Earth Spirits. You can absolutely get by with only 12 of these. So you fit in 2 spirits of something that you want to side deck. So Josh and I fit in the Fire Spirits because Josh and I were siding the Lavaliths, which is why we played the 2 Fire Spirits in the main deck. So we didn't have to side the 2 Fire Spirits so that we could, leave room for more cards in our side deck. Alternatively, you can put the 2 Owloon, the 2 Lunar Spirits in here, and the reason why you would put the Owloon in here is so that you can play the Dense Fog in the side. Realistically speaking, the side deck that we were running with, we'll talk about in just a second, leaves enough room for you to play all of those, so you can play the 2 Fire Spirits in main, 2 Lavalith inside, 3 Dense Fog, and the 2 Lunar Spirits in the side, or you can just play the 2 Lunar Spirits here, put the 2 Fire Spirits in the side with the 2 Lavalith and the 3 Dense Fog. Now, the reason to put these in, and the reason why I personally prefer to put the Lunar Spirits in over the Fire Spirits, is because these are just going to be the first spirits that you choose to expend. So let's say, for example, you go, like, your opponent does something and you PTA them and you pay with a Lunar Spirit, then for pretty much the rest of the game until you pay the other one, or maybe even after you pay the other one, your opponent's going to be worrying about Dense Fog, they're going to be worrying about Specterus, being like, oh, is that in his deck maybe? Whereas if you're spending, like, Fire Spirits, I guess they'd, like, maybe be playing around Lavalith, but because Lavalith costs more than a Dense Fog does, having, like, the Lunar Spirits be the one that they're worrying about is something that they could much more expect you to have, like, maybe 1 extra copy of rather than the full 2 copies of for the Lavalith. Now, off to the side deck, we won't be showing you the exact side deck that we played because in hindsight, there's a couple of things that need to be different about it. So we're just going to show you the things that you can consider, and then you decide what you would rather play in this deck. In terms of the Foley Forest, I did not play this in the side deck. Josh sided a 2nd copy of it. Did you ever side it in?
Yes.
So into what matchups?
So especially with it being the first tournament of Daybreak, there's a lot of unexpected stuff that people can be bringing to the tournament. Like, I know that there's a potential Solar Nexus build that can be playing the Temple of the Sun.
Well, the deck that got top 8 was playing it, yeah?
Yeah. So the deck that got top 8 was playing it. The deck I played against in top 4, the Water 5s build, was also on Atlantis.
Okay.
So I figured that there was going to be a lot of like fringe playability of the stadium runes. So I wanted an additional counter, because if you stick your stadium in a matchup that a stadium matters a lot, you auto win the matchup.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, the stadium wars are really big sometimes.
Exactly. So it also ends up being another Nexus target for your Mudlet and your Lynx. So there's a lot of synergies there with a lot of other decks that aren't playing additional stadiums kind of lose out on that synergy.
That's fair. And then we, like I said, cited this third copy of Tsunami, third copy of the Poison Tipped Arrow. And then both of us also cited double copies of Verdolith and double copies of Lavalith, which was one of the reasons why there was those fire spirits in the main deck. However, it's not the only reason why we have those spirits of fire in the main deck. Personally, the Verdoliths, I thought they were really nice, especially into 5s, because that deck is so cheap on resources that it expends, that there are some times where I'll just like resolve an Earthquake, and then I'll activate a Demeter, and I'll go Demeter for 3, and then make my Verdolith live, slap the Verdolith down, and then just heal 4. It's really good at times. So Verdolith, a very, very good card in that regard. And Lavalith, I side in for any matchup that has Divine Runes or Stadiums and stuff like that, because the Divines are something you really, really want to clear, especially into something like a Chronodile or whatever, where the Atlantis is keeping their Chronodile from being Earthquaked. You just Lavalith, pop the, not the Atlantis, the Poseidon, and then you clear the Poseidon with this, and then after that, you're able to Earthquake the Chronodile. It's very, very powerful.
Just to kind of add on to the Verdolith conversation, I had the opposite experience with Verdolith in this tournament, where before I felt like Verdolith was fantastic into the matchup, but with the additional power that Earth got in this set with Mudlet and more ways to out the 5s so that everything isn't so expensive, I found myself very even on spirits with my opponent almost at all times, so that the card was almost never live. So if I didn't have Demeter to purposely put myself low, I couldn't cast the card.
That's fair. I really didn't get that experience. I felt like every time I had this, it was always live, and I resolved it. I even resolved it, I believe, in that game 3 against Jayak. I resolved this, and it was either the game 3 or was the game 2, but I remember resolving it against Jayak at one point, and I've always felt like this card was pretty solid at times when you saw it. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe something to test.
Yeah, it's weird. Like I said, this was the first time that I ever felt bad about the card.
That's weird. That's very weird. I didn't feel bad about it at all the entire day. Something to consider. But again, we're giving you guys all the options for the side decks that you can test what you think you might like, and then see all the options that are available to you. Then obviously we have the Dense Fogs, which, you know, clearly if you're going to do this, you have to either put in the 2 Lunar Spirits in your main Spirit deck or put them in your side deck. Dense Fog really good against any deck that Nexus is, because typically Nexus effects are going to be like Link effects. So when they go effect to Nexus, you Dense Fog them there so they can't use the effect when receives or when Nexus is and stuff like that, which is very, very strong. Otherwise, this also beats Viscerus, which if you're playing Earth, Viscerus kind of fucks you really bad at times. So having this to sometimes beat their Viscerus, or, you know, to beat maybe like any other kind of effect that changes stats like a Galaxy or something like that, just having the option to side this in is very, very strong at times. Then after that, we played Boombat. I played 2, Josh played 3. Did you side these in at all? Because I did not.
I did. I sided into 5s in particular. So just, you have to answer their guy every single turn, and if you don't, then it kind of gets out of control really quick with their hand advantage.
That's fair. I chose not to side this into 5s. I was siding the Verdolith more than anything. I was usually siding in the Verdoliths, PTA, and Tsunami, but I can see why this would be a decent option. I basically kept this in the back pocket specifically for bullshit. Like, sometimes people will do the whole bag of wins thing, or they'll set up like some guy that's hard to remove from the field. You can't be targeted by runes or anything like that. Boombat is just like the check to that. It just says, okay, you've gotten rune protection. This is an Celestial, so I'm going to pop your guy.
Yeah, I think also to note too, with that card paired along with Dense Fog plus Boombat pretty much outs anything.
That's true.
For the most part. So I know in our tier list, we had mentioned that Chronodile potentially was going to have a lot of representation. Boombat plus Dense Fog outs it, no problem.
And it did have a lot of representation. That and Kiribis were two of the most represented decks in the format, in the tournament.
Yeah, exactly. So like, you have to plan for the bullshit. It also paired along with that too, Wasp Ivy, fan favorite deck.
Yeah.
Boombat deals with it very easily, especially if they are doing the bag of wins stuff to pair along with it. I know we didn't see a whole lot of it in the tourney, but you gotta have the anti-bag of wins out somewhere.
Yeah,
right?
you gotta have some kind of answer. Like, that's what the side deck is for, right? You gotta have some kind of answer for the bullshit that you might not see, but you'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And now for the last thing. Josh didn't side this, but I did. And honestly, I thought it was really cool. I played it at my locals. It kicked ass at my locals. I didn't side it in a single time, unfortunately, but it was 2 copies of Boltuga and 3 copies of Eruption. Now, the reason I was playing this, the reason for this, the plan with this engine is specifically if you're playing against a deck that pays a lot of spirits. I was expecting a ton of Solar, and Solar pays a lot of spirits. I was expecting a good amount of Wasp Ivy if I saw any of it, and Wasp Ivy does also pay a lot of spirits. They go Argo into Poison Tunic, whatever, that costs them a lot of spirits. The same thing with the Chronodile deck. The Chronodile deck has to put a ton of spirits on the field. So because they have to put all their spirits on the field, their spirit deck gets really low really quickly. So in a late game scenario, if you see 1 or even 2 of this, you can go Eruption, burn 3, Boltuga, add back Eruption, Eruption, burn 3 again, and then that 6 damage could potentially just close out games. Unfortunately, I played against 5s all day. So because I played against 5s, that deck is super good at holding their spirits. So because of that, I never sided this in. But if I just basically had this, again, for bullshit, in any of those matchups where I'm playing against someone that is expending a lot of their spirits very quickly, this is just a fantastic engine to play in it. I did this at locals against multiple people. I did this against a Pantera player. The entire game, I was just baiting him into Twin Drop Pantera so that I could go Eruption, Boltuga, Eruption. Game, you know?
One of the things we've kind of shown with this side deck is that Earth, compared to, I think, almost any other deck, I think specifically also 5s, has the most amount of tools.
Yeah, it's
that you
very
can
versatile.
put in the side deck to do whatever you want. You can do a burn strategy, a stall heal strategy, and then also still be able to side all the other tools you need to deal with those rough matchups.
Yeah, it has a very versatile side deck, which also is one of the big strengths of the deck. The fact that you're able to just, like, slot in a bunch of tools that, like, not everyone can find room to fit. And also, like, things like Vertolith that you can just in-engine, like, heal with and stuff like that just feels very, very strong. And having the option to side in all of these things and have the option to kind of pick and choose what it is that you want to slot in is very powerful for this deck. Because the deck's engine, you're able to, like, cut certain things here and there depending on matchup to, like, fit the rest of the stuff that you need. So with that being said, that's the deck that we played. Again, Josh made it to the finals, lost to the winner, Jayak. Congratulations to Jayak. And I made it to top 4, also losing to Jayak in a game that I should not have lost, but that's completely on me. We got to get back to the lab and test and practice so that I don't make mistakes like that again. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, don't forget to use our creator code, which is linked in the description below if ever you buy any Illustrials product on the website. And don't forget to become a channel member if you would like to get deck profiles a day early. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace!